Spider-Man hit the big screen in 2002 with all the force of a ton of bricks shot out of a large cannon amusingly aimed at a foil balloon. It wasn't just a superhero movie, it was a cultural phenomenon. Spider-Man. It's apparent some people can't go 5 minutes without referencing the theme tune to the 1960s Spider-Man cartoon. Does whatever a spider can, you say? So what, he hides underneath a pile of clothes in the laundry and leaps out at you when you least expect it? Well, that sounds about right, little bastard. Spider-Man had consistently been one of Marvel's most popular characters ever since he was created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko in 1962. He'd been popular enough to star in several comics and animated series, but live-action success eluded him, like a process server trying to hand D.B. Cooper a subpoena.
What's your name, kid?
The Human Spider.
The Human Spider, that's it? That's the best you got?
Yeah.
Oh, that sucks.
The Amazing Spider-Man!
My name's the Human Spider.
There had been a short-lived series from 1977, and of course the Japanese cult series, but basically Spider-Man had to sit by and watch while Batman, Superman, and more recently the X-Men all had successful runs on the big screen. Marvel Comics had been through a prolonged rough patch financially, its ownership changing hands more often than the travelling pants. Marvel went into bankruptcy in the mid-90s, but a buyout by toy company Toy Biz brought characters like Ike Perlmutter and Arya Vard into the Marvel story. There had been attempts to do something with Spider-Man throughout the 80s and 90s, but like World Peace, nothing really eventuated. Rights were tied up for a time with various companies, but by the end of the 90s, Marvel finally seemed free to do with Spider-Man as they pleased. As part of Operation Dig Marvel Out from Under Shit Mountain, the company's new management licensed out its properties to various studios, often under terms that made it almost impossible for Marvel to ever recover those film rights. In the early 2000s, that really wasn't considered a problem, since sustained success with movies based on Marvel Comics was still an unattainable dream. The film rights to Iron Man were at the time worth less than a copy of the failed house husband magazine Ironing Man. Sony paid $7 million for the rights to make Spider-Man movies, which turned out to be a good deal for Marvel, yet over time, a bad deal for them. That's of course grossly simplifying what went on, leaving out relevant but not particularly funny legal details. So let's just say they flipped a coin, sued each other over who owned heads and who owned tails, swapped rights to this, that and the other, and the result was, well, Spider-Man. Sony owned Columbia Studios, who had made the 1977 Spider-Man series, and they got to work putting together a Spider-Man film, perhaps buoyed by the positive reception of Fox's first X-Men film in 2000. Various directors were considered, but the job was eventually offered to Sam Raimi. He had made his name in dark fare, starting with genre fare like the Evil Dead films and Darkman, before working on smaller projects for studios. With Spider-Man, he proved he could do more than just fancy staging and camera work, and gave us a film that sucked you into the world of a meek kid who happens to have superpowers.
Who is Spider-Man? He's a criminal, that's who he is. A vigilante, a public menace.
This is Peter Parker, photographer, overachieving science student, dork.
Stop the blast!
He's bitten by a radioactive spider and wakes up the next day to find he has abs, can see without his glasses, has super reflexes, sticky hands stickier hands than the average teenager, and is able to emit a sticky white substance from his body. Not like that, it comes off his wrists. Ah, shit. Anyway, he can shoot webs, and that's a documented medical condition, so don't judge. Peter lives with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben, who's been laid off from the rice factory. Peter is in love with his neighbour Mary Jane Watson since the time before he could shoot sticky webs from his body, and at school he's treated like a meek freak by all but his friend Harry Osborn, the son of businessman Norman Osborn.
I'm something of a scientist myself.
Peter quickly finds his powers could be useful if he had better mastery over the sticky web goo his body produces in such large quantities. He experiments with what he can and can't do. Uncle Ben and Aunt May are worried about Peter. They're concerned he spends too much time locked in his bedroom, unlike other teenagers. Uncle Ben tries to talk with Peter, but Peter's not in a chatty mood.
And I know I'm not your father.
Then stop pretending to be.
Very quickly, in order to get some quick cash so he can buy a car that he thinks will impress Mary Jane, usually just known as MJ, Peter Parker enters a wrestling contest where he prevails, but the promoter stiffs him, so Peter just lets him be robbed. Unfortunately, that thief carjacks Uncle Ben's car, leaving Uncle Ben for dead. Peter feels somewhat guilty about Ben's death. Meanwhile, Norman Osborn is under pressure at work. A super serum his company Oscorp is working on is having problems, and in order to save his position within the company, Osborn tests the formula on himself, despite the potential side effect being madness. Of course, scientists using themselves as a guinea pig is one of the oldest tropes in comics, and it's a neat and handy shortcut into turning somebody into a villain. Osborn becomes schizophrenic, talking to his alter ego, the Green Goblin.
Performance enhancers. Bingo. Me. Your greatest creation.
After his company had conveniently developed a green flying platform with a matching operator's suit. High school's over and everyone's going to the city. Harry and Peter are roommates. Peter tries to find a job, while MJ's dreams of becoming an actress have hit a few snags. And of course, Peter, being too meek to make a move on MJ, has to sit by and sulk when he discovers Harry has swooped in, dating MJ on the quiet. Wrong superhero, but appropriate enough. Norman Osborn is being kicked out of his company after the board sells his company to a competitor.
You know how much I sacrificed?
Norman takes this about as well as can be expected, breaking more glasses and wipes out the board at a festival where Spider-Man breaks cover and saves MJ for the first but not last time.
Who are you?
You know who I am.
I do.
Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Peter's job search takes him to the Daily Bugle, since the future is clearly in print media. He comes face to face with one of the Spider-Man universe's most outlandish non-villain characters, editor J. Jonah Jameson.
He doesn't want to be famous, and I'll make him infamous.
Oh, he's a shithead all right, but a funny shithead. Like Dickhead Dave, who hangs around my local watering hole. Dickhead Dave pisses his pants like clockwork after his fourth drink rather than give up his stool at the bar, which by this point is unnecessary since regular bar patrons have already instituted an unofficial 5-stool exclusion zone around Dickhead Dave's soggy chair. J. Jonah Jameson will pay Peter Parker peanuts for pictures, but protests will prevent Peter Parker's pick payday since he has so few pennies he has to give permission to print or pass on the prospect of perpetual payment as a paparazzo. What? Mary Jane is falling for Spider-Man after their hot and heavy and wet kiss, after he saves her a second time. Goblin tries to track down Spider-Man as he's the only one who can stop him. Norman meets MJ and is not impressed. Apparently he was not a big fan of Bring It On. Norman also realises Peter is Spider-Man, which was convenient since it is really late in the film to be introducing a new major character. And then the two face off in a smaller than you'd expect confrontation. Spidey is backed up by the good people of New York.
The goblin killed. I had nothing to do with it. Don't let him take me again. I beg you.
Spider-Man's not taken in by Norman's attempts to talk his way out of trouble, but thankfully his spider senses see him prevail.
Oh.
Harry Osborn blames Spider-Man, whoever he is, for causing his father's death. Peter walks away from MJ just as she finally comes around to liking him for himself. Schmuck. Also, she's realised that Spider-Man and Peter use the same flavour lip balm, Cherry Lola Papaya. You know, the mask chafes.
Who am I? I'm Spider-Man.
Spider-Man is, how can I say this, f***ing amazing. It took a character that hadn't successfully been able to make the leap to live action and knocked it out of the park.
Fly! Up and away, Web! Shazam!
It has human characters, tells the origin story with a minimum of fuss, and gets on with the film without ever getting past the fact that Peter Parker can't ever seem to get his shit together despite having all of these spider advantages.
Spider-Man wasn't attacking the city. He was trying to save it. That's slander.
It is not. I resent that. Slander is spoken. In print, it's libel.
Tobey Maguire wasn't an obvious choice as Peter Parker. You don't necessarily buy him as a dork, but you don't have to for very long. The reality that being Spider-Man doesn't make his life immediately better is a central part of the character. Maguire would be the definitive Spider-Man, for a while at least, until all those pesky Brits took over.
Hey, you have blue eyes. I didn't notice without your glasses.
Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane is solid. She's just out of Peter's league at the start of the film, despite life throwing her some bum deals in this movie.
Do what you need to with her, then broom her fast.
Thanks for sticking up for me, Harry.
You heard?
Everyone heard that creep.
The creep is my father, all right? If I'm lucky, I'll become half of what he is.
Well, that's prophetic. James Franco as Osborn Jr., oddly but not really, not asked back for No Way Home, would take Harry from troubled rich kid to whiny rich boy and ultimately a villain over the course of the trilogy. Rosemary Harris's Aunt May was the last time they'd make the character look like old school Aunt May in the comics. Cliff Robertson as Ben is a character with little screen time relative to the impact he has on the story, and he does of course get to say one of Spider-Man's most iconic lines and not seem silly saying it.
With great power comes great responsibility.
J.K. Simmons would steal every scene he's in, which leads me to wonder why there isn't a prequel spin-off show showing how J. Jonah Jameson covered up Watergate.
You don't trust anybody, that's your problem.
I trust my barber. What are you, his lawyer? Get out of here. Let him sue me. Get rich like a normal person.
And Willem Dafoe as Osborn, the foe.
Bringing you what you've always wanted. Power beyond your wildest dreams, and it's only the beginning.
There aren't many actors who could pull off the two characters talking to each other with as much style as Dafoe, even if he does have a thing about breaking glasses. Pro tip, serve him a drink in a paper cup. There are also small roles for Raimi's Evil Dead star Bruce Campbell, who names Spider-Man, Raimi's brother Ted Raimi, Octavia Spencer, and under the wig Elizabeth Banks. There's also wrestling star Randy Savage, and if you blink, you'll miss Xena.
Guy with 8 hands. Sounds hot.
There was always a little bit of controversy over Peter's organic web shooters rather than the mechanical web shooters of the comic. Raimi felt organic shooters were slightly more believable if slightly more gross, and eventually organic produced webs made their way into some of the comics. As we know, comic book readers are always ready to completely 100% embrace even the smallest, tiniest, infinitesimal change from the source material.
Go! Go! Go, Web, go!
Raimi's instincts here are first class. Everything works in this film, from the music by Danny Elfman, again typecast with creating superhero themes, to the costumes and effects.
No one says no to me!
It's not yet at the point where everything is created totally within the computer. Close, but not yet. FX pioneer John Dykstra knew the film would require a lot of CG effects work, while at the same time Sam Raimi wanted as much practical work as possible. There's a lot of CG in the film, but the scale of the film meant it never got to the point of ridiculousness. Of course, we are talking about a film where a guy bitten by a spider emits sticky white goo and is chased about by a man who has long conversations with himself. Green Goblin was originally meant to have a more organic look to his face, but changed during production to a mask. Costume designer James Acheson, before he was big in Hollywood films, started off at the BBC, where he designed some very iconic looks for Doctor Who. Spider-Man is a good example of one-issue comic book adaptations would have to grapple with again and again. Spider-Man wears a mask, and in the film Goblin wears a mask. But having hired good actors, you don't get an awful lot of emoting happening when you can't see the actors' faces, particularly their eyes. The ever-increasing popularity of these characters in movies gives filmmakers the challenge of how to use your actors most advantageously during emotional scenes when masked up. Does your hero take the mask on and off like an indecisive bank robber? Do you rip the mask? Have large apertures in the mask so you can see the actors' eyes and mouths? Or just have the tech so advanced you can have the helmets and mask magically appear and reappear? Filmmakers would try all of the above.
Imagine what we could accomplish together.
As it's a 2002 movie, it's still a world before everybody has a cell phone. Peter even uses, what did they call this? A payphone. Good lord. Here is a film that pushes so many of the right buttons. Okay, that's not a payphone reference. Mixing action, comedy, and romance. It's never less than fun and sets up a solid foundation for an even better sequel. And third one that was, you know. But how good is Spider-Man 2? If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.